Did you know that in North America alone, there are over 3 million abandoned structures, many of them hidden deep in the woods, far from civilization? Some of these cabins have dark pasts, places where people have vanished without a trace, where cryptic messages were found carved into walls, and where strange occurrences have left even the most skeptical investigators speechless. One of the most chilling cases is the mysterious disappearance of the Simmons family in 1991. They had just moved into an old hunting cabin deep in the Appalachian wilderness, hoping for a fresh start. But one night, something happened. Something so terrifying that they left behind all their belongings, food still on the table, their car in the driveway, yet they were never seen again. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing stolen, just an eerie silence and a house that looked as if time had frozen in place. And they aren't the only ones. Across the world, countless remote cabins hold unsolved mysteries, from campers who wake up with deep scratches on their bodies, to hikers who stumble upon ruins that weren't there the day before. Some believe it's the work of the paranormal. Others think these cabins were never meant to be found in the first place. Tonight, we step into the unknown. We'll explore the stories behind these creepy cabins, their dark secrets, eerie legends, and the horrifying truths that may be lurking within. So grab your flashlight, stay close, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. There's something unsettling about cabins, isn't there? Maybe it's the isolation, the way they sit, tucked away from the rest of the world, surrounded by dense forests where help is miles away. Or perhaps it's the way they seem frozen in time, their wooden walls holding onto secrets, their doors creaking under the weight of memories best left forgotten. Some of these cabins were once places of warmth, where families gathered around the fire, where laughter echoed through the halls. But over time, many of them were left behind, abandoned to nature, their stories slowly fading into the wilderness. And yet, some places refuse to be forgotten. Strange sounds still echo in the night. Unseen eyes seem to watch from the darkness, and those who dare to enter often report the same thing, a feeling deep in their bones that they're not alone. And then, there are the cabins with darker histories, the ones with blood-stained floors, cryptic carvings, and stories of people who checked in but never checked out. What happened within these walls? What secrets are buried beneath the floorboards? Some say it's the work of desperate men, hermits who lost their grip on reality, drifters who took up residence and never left. Others whisper of something far worse, things that lurk in the woods, drawn to these places like moths to a flame, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon their domain. In this video, we'll step into the shadows and uncover the true horror behind some of the world's creepiest cabins. From abandoned lodges to remote hideouts with gruesome pasts, these places all share one thing in common: they are cursed with a darkness that refuses to fade. Some of these stories will chill you to the core, others may make you think twice before booking that cozy getaway in the woods. But before we continue, a warning: not every cabin should be explored and not every mystery should be solved. Now, let's begin our descent into the unknown. Across the world, cabins have become synonymous with isolation. They stand alone in the depths of forests, in the shadow of mountains, and at the edge of forgotten trails, cut off from the bustling world. To some, they are peaceful retreats, escapes from the chaos of modern life. But to others, they are something far more sinister. There's a reason horror movies, folklore, and urban legends so often revolve around cabins. They embody solitude, vulnerability, and the unknown. Their remoteness means that whatever happens inside them, good or evil, may never be discovered. Some say the darkness inside these walls isn't just metaphorical, that some cabins absorb the energy of those who suffer within them, trapping spirits, curses, and horrors that refuse to fade away. There are countless stories, unsolved mysteries, chilling encounters, and strange disappearances, all tied to lonely cabins in the woods. Some are the homes of reclusive hermits who were said to have lost themselves to the wilderness. Others were hideouts for criminals, where terrible crimes unfolded away from prying eyes. And then, There are those cabins that seem to have no logical explanation at all, the ones where people claim to see flickering lights inside when no one lives there, where footsteps echo in empty rooms, where objects move on their own. Are these just ghost stories, or is something else at play? A hunter once told a story about a cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It had been abandoned for years, yet when he found it, the dust on the floor was undisturbed, except for what looked like small, childlike footprints leading in circles. The hunter didn't think much of it until he stepped inside. That's when he noticed something chilling. Every single window was covered, not from the inside, but the outside. Someone, or something, had deliberately sealed it off, as if trying to trap something in, or keep something out. Another story tells of a small wooden cabin discovered in Alaska. A group of hikers seeking shelter from a storm broke open the door and made a chilling discovery. Inside, the entire cabin was stripped bare. No furniture, no supplies, except for a small wooden box sitting in the center of the room. Inside it, they found an old, tattered journal, its pages filled with frantic scrawls. The last entry read, "If you find this, leave now. Do not stay past nightfall. It comes when the moon is high." The hikers left immediately. To this day, no one knows who wrote the journal or what it was. In 1987, a man in Oregon bought an abandoned cabin as a hunting lodge. His first night there, he heard what he described as a low, agonizing moan coming from outside the cabin. Thinking it was an injured animal, he stepped outside, but found nothing. He went back inside, locked the door, and tried to sleep. The next morning, he woke to find deep scratches on the outside of the door, as if something had been trying to get in. He never stayed in that cabin again. Skeptics say that these are just tall tales, stories passed down to scare campers and hikers. They claim the noises people hear in the woods are just the wind, the shadows are just tricks of the light, and the eerie feelings are just paranoia. But how do we explain the fact that these stories are so widespread? From North America to Europe, from Asia to South America, people from all walks of life report eerily similar experiences with cabins in remote locations. Could there be something real lurking in these places? Are some cabins truly cursed by past tragedies? Are there forces in the wilderness that we don't yet understand? Or is it simply the human mind playing tricks, turning the unknown into monsters? Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. Not every cabin is just an empty building. Some places seem to hold on to the past, refusing to let go of the darkness within. And for those who dare to enter, the question remains, will they make it back out? Deep in the wilds of the Northwest Territories, an abandoned cabin stands as a silent witness to one of the most chilling mysteries in Canadian history. It all started in the early 1900s, when prospectors Frank and Willie McLeod ventured into the Nahanni Valley in search of gold. They built a small log cabin to shelter from the harsh winter, but they never made it out. Months later, their decomposed bodies were found near the cabin, both missing their heads. Over the next few decades, at least a dozen more prospectors and travelers disappeared in the area, many of them found decapitated. Some say it was a territorial dispute with the indigenous Dean people, others blame wild animals or natural disasters. But then, why were some of the bodies found with no signs of struggle? Even today, explorers who enter the valley report eerie feelings. Some claim to hear whispers in the wind, others say they felt watched, as if something unseen lingers in the shadows. The abandoned cabins scattered through the valley remain untouched, avoided even by those who live nearby. In 1981, a small cabin in Keddie, California, became the scene of one of the most brutal unsolved murders in American history. Inside Cabin 28, Sue Sharp and 3 others were found murdered in an attack so violent it stunned investigators. The victims had been bound, bludgeoned and stabbed, yet no one heard a sound. Despite years of investigation, no arrests were ever made. Some believe the killers were protected by law enforcement, others suggest something more sinister, dark energy surrounding the area, leading to acts of inexplicable violence. The original cabin was torn down in 2004, but even today, visitors claim that strange sounds can be heard at the site. Disembodied whispers, faint crying, and sometimes the unmistakable creak of a door swinging open, even when there's no door left to open. Tucked away in the abandoned town of Boston, Ohio, better known as Helltown, there's a cabin that locals refuse to enter. Some say it was once home to a government experiment gone wrong, leading to reports of strange creatures and bizarre lights in the woods. Others claim it was a cult meeting place where rituals were performed in the dead of night. Hikers who have attempted to stay the night in the cabin report intense feelings of dread, the sensation of being watched, and even waking up with scratches on their bodies. Electronics refuse to work inside, and some say they've seen shadowy figures moving past the broken windows. Whether the stories are exaggerated or not, one thing is clear. Locals warn against spending the night in the Helltown cabin. Some who have ignored the warnings claim they saw something that made them run and never look back. In the winter of 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into the Ural Mountains. They never returned. When a search team found their campsite, it looked like they had left in a panic, some fleeing in socks or barefoot into the freezing snow. Their bodies were scattered across the mountainside, some with fractures so severe they resembled car crash injuries, yet with no external wounds. Others were missing eyes or tongues. Near the site was an old hunting cabin, untouched. Some theorists suggest the hikers had tried to reach it for shelter but never made it. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. Some blame extreme weather, others whisper of military experiments, yet the mystery remains. Locals still refuse to enter the hunting cabin, saying that the spirits of the hikers linger in the area, warning others to stay away. At first glance, Bulliskin House in Scotland doesn't look like a cabin, but behind the grand structure is a small, isolated guest house where dark magic is said to have been practiced. This was once the home of Aleister Crowley, the infamous occultist who claimed to have summoned spirits in the early 1900s. He described terrifying experiences during his rituals, claiming that once he opened the door to the supernatural, he could never fully close it again. Over the years, tragedy after tragedy followed anyone who lived there. A later owner died in the house, and another's housekeeper was said to have gone insane. Visitors claim that the cabin behind the house still holds dark energy. They report seeing strange figures standing in the windows, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of unease when stepping inside. Are these stories just urban legends? Or could there be real energy attached to these locations? Is it the solitude of these cabins that breeds fear? The eerie silence, the way shadows creep across old wooden walls? In the next section, we'll explore real-life encounters from people who have stayed in remote cabins and experienced something they can't explain. But before we do, ask yourself, would you spend the night in any of these places? Deep in the Pennsylvania countryside sat a small, unassuming cabin, a place where Jack and Janet Smurl thought they could escape from the stresses of everyday life. But what they found inside would become one of the most terrifying paranormal cases ever recorded. It started with small things, unexplained noises, furniture moving on its own. At first, Jack and Janet dismissed it as their imagination. But soon the activity escalated into something far more sinister. Loud banging echoed through the walls at all hours of the night as if someone, or something, was trying to break in, though the doors and windows remained locked. Cold spots moved through the cabin like invisible hands brushing against their skin. Strange rotting smells filled the air, making them nauseous. And then, the whispering began. At first it was barely audible, a soft voice calling their names from empty rooms, but one night, Janet woke up to something breathing directly into her ear. When she turned on the light, nothing was there. Doors slammed shut on their own, and a dark shadow figure began appearing at the foot of their bed, staring at them with hollow eyes. No matter how many times they left, the moment they stepped back inside, it was waiting for them. One evening, as Jack sat alone in the living room, an unseen force suddenly lifted him out of his chair and threw him against the wall. Janet ran to him, only to see deep scratches appear across his chest, claw marks that seemed to burn into his skin. Terrified, the Smurls called in priests, paranormal investigators, and even the famous demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens claimed the cabin was infested with a demonic presence, one that had attached itself to the couple and would not let go. Even with multiple exorcisms performed, the entity refused to leave. It whispered threats, slammed furniture, and made it clear this was its home. Eventually the Smurls fled, abandoning the cabin and everything inside it. But here's the terrifying part: the haunting didn't stop. The dark presence followed them to their new home, proving that whatever they had disturbed wasn't tied to the cabin, it was tied to them. Their case became one of the most famous paranormal investigations in history, inspiring books, TV specials, and even a movie. Was it all real, or was something psychological at play? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain: to this day, no one dares spend the night in that cabin. The Smurl case is just one of many terrifying stories tied to cabins in the woods. But what if the most chilling stories aren't the famous ones? What if there are cabins out there, still hiding their secrets, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitor? In the next section, we dive into the real-life experiences of people who have stayed in isolated cabins and encountered something that defies explanation. As we've explored throughout this video, cabins in remote locations have long been a source of both fascination and fear. Their isolation makes them the perfect setting for eerie encounters, unexplained mysteries, and chilling legends that have endured for generations. From the stories of abandoned cabins where people have vanished without a trace to places like the Smurl cabin, where dark forces seem to take hold, these eerie dwellings have left behind questions that may never be answered. There's something inherently unsettling about a cabin deep in the woods, far from civilization, surrounded by silence where no one can hear you scream. Is it the history hidden within their walls? The idea that someone or something may still lurk inside? Or is it the fear of the unknown, the realization that once the sun sets, anything could happen? Perhaps it's the countless urban legends, true crime cases, and paranormal stories tied to cabins that make them feel more than just rustic retreats. They feel like time capsules of terror, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitor. Would you dare step inside a cabin with a dark past? Would you spend the night in a place where strange things have been reported? Many who do claim they leave with more questions than answers. Whispers in the dark, shadowy figures in the corners, and an overwhelming sense that they are not alone. The truth is, no one really knows what lurks in these cabins. But one thing is certain: if you ever find yourself in one, and something doesn't feel right, maybe it's time to leave before it's too late. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of haunted and mysterious cabins, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling stories. And if you have a spooky cabin experience of your own, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, stay safe, and stay out of the woods at night. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed in a cabin that gave you an eerie feeling? Have you experienced something you just couldn't explain? Strange noises, flickering lights, whispers in the dark? Drop your stories in the comments below. Whether it's an urban legend from your hometown or a first-hand encounter, I'd love to read your experiences. Who knows? Your story might even be featured in a future video. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark secrets of creepy cabins, don't stop here. Check out my other videos on haunted places, paranormal mysteries, and unsolved disappearances. Click here to watch my latest video on haunted forests, where people vanish and eerie figures appear when no one is around. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another chilling story. The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Will you be brave enough to explore them with me? Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and whatever you do, don't ignore the whispers in the dark.